The emergency alarm echoed through the corridors of the Terran Federation headquarters on Luna Base. Ambassador Maria Santos rushed through the hallways as dozens of staff members moved with urgent purpose. 3 years of galactic war had finally reached a breaking point, and the universe was about to witness something that would change everything. The war between the Kroner Empire and the Valeth Collective had consumed entire star systems. Billions of beings had died, and countless more had fled their homes to escape the violence. The younger species of the galaxy watched in terror as these two ancient powers tore civilization apart. Most had been forced to choose sides or risk. Total destruction. Maria entered the main conference room where Admiral Robert Hayes paced before a massive, holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Kroner territory, blue represented Valeth space, and tiny green dots scattered throughout showed the neutral worlds that humanity had established. "The situation is critical," Admiral Hayes began without greeting. "Both fleets are moving toward the Kepler system. Intelligence reports suggest they plan to use Sanctuary as a testing ground for new weapons. 3 million refugees from 47 different species are trapped on that planet." Maria studied the tactical display. Sanctuary was one of 12 worlds that humans had turned into safe havens during the war. They provided food, medical care, and protection to anyone who needed it, regardless of which side they had originally supported. It was humanity's way of staying true to their principles, while the galaxy burned around them. "What does the Peacekeeping Council recommend?" Maria asked, though she already suspected the answer would terrify her. "We're sending 3 ships," Hayes replied grimly. "The Harmony, Valiant, and Meridian will establish a defensive perimeter around Sanctuary. They have orders to protect those civilians at all costs." Maria felt her blood turn cold. 3 human vessels against the combined might of 2 galactic superpowers seemed like suicide. The Kroner Empire commanded massive battle fleets designed for pure destruction. The Valeth Collective possessed technology so advanced it seemed like magic to most species. Either force alone could overwhelm human defenses. "Admiral, that's a death sentence for our people," Maria protested. "Those ships won't last an hour against what's coming." Hayes turned to face her with eyes that held both determination and sadness. "Maria, do you know why every species in this galaxy respects us despite our technological limitations? It's not because we're the strongest or the smartest. It's because when everyone else runs away from doing what's right, we run toward it." The holographic display shifted to show feeds from Sanctuary's surface. Families of dozens of different species worked together in refugee camps. Children who had never seen their homeworlds played games that transcended language barriers. Medical stations treated wounded beings without asking which side of the war they had supported. "Look at what we've built," Hayes continued. 47 species living together in peace while their home governments tear each other apart. We proved that cooperation is possible. Now we have to prove that some things are worth defending." Maria watched the peaceful scenes from Sanctuary and understood the weight of the moment. Humanity had spent 50 years establishing themselves as mediators and peacekeepers. They had gained the trust of countless species by consistently choosing compassion over profit, protection over power. But that reputation meant nothing if they abandoned it when the stakes became too high. "The crews volunteered," Hayes added. Quietly, every single person on those 3 ships requested this assignment. "They know the risks, but they also know what we stand for." The door to the conference room opened and Captain Emma Torres entered with 2 other officers. Maria recognized them as the commanders of the 3 peacekeeping vessels. They looked calm despite facing almost certain death in the coming battle. "Admiral, we're ready to depart," Captain Torres reported. "All 3 ships are fully supplied, and our crews are prepared for extended combat operations." Hayes nodded solemnly. "Emma, I want you to understand something. This mission isn't about winning a military victory. It's about showing the galaxy that someone still believes in protecting the innocent. Win or lose, your actions will be remembered." Captain Torres straightened her shoulders. Sir, we spent 3 years watching civilizations destroy each other over power and territory. Today we get to fight for something better. Today we fight for the idea that every life has value, regardless of species or allegiance. Maria watched. The three captains leave to board their ships and felt a mixture of pride and terror. These brave souls were about to face impossible odds to defend beings they had never met. It was the most human thing imaginable. As the news of the mission spread throughout Luna Base, something unexpected began happening. Communications started arriving from across the galaxy. Species that had remained hidden during the war began, expressing support for the human mission. Merchant guilds offered their ships, medical organizations prepared hospital vessels, and even some military units from neutral worlds requested permission to join the defense of Sanctuary. "Admiral," a communications officer called out, "we're receiving messages from 17 different species offering assistance. The Andorian trade fleet is already changing course toward Kepler. The Delta Ram Medical Corps is mobilizing their entire hospital fleet." Hayes stared at the reports with amazement. For 3 years, the galaxy's smaller species had cowered in fear of the two great powers. Now they were suddenly finding courage they never knew they possessed. "It seems our people won't be fighting alone after all," Hayes murmured, Maria realized. They were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. The human decision to risk everything for 3 million refugees was inspiring other species to take similar risks. For the first time since the war began, the galaxy's peaceful civilizations were choosing to stand together instead of hiding in isolation. The 3 human ships departed, Luna Base surrounded by growing hope and terrible uncertainty. They carried with them not just the lives of their crews, but the dreams of every species that believed peace was still possible. The next few days would determine whether courage could triumph over overwhelming force, and whether the galaxy still had room for heroes. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, Maria whispered a prayer for their success. Humanity was about to discover if their principles were strong enough to change the course of galactic history. The transition from hyperspace felt different this time. Lieutenant David Park had made hundreds of jumps throughout his career with the Terran Federation, but dropping into the Kepler system carried a weight that pressed against his chest like gravity itself. Through the viewport of the U's Harmony, he could see why two of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy hung in the darkness like ancient gods preparing for war. The Kroner Empire's fleet stretched across the void in a formation designed to maximize destruction. Their ships were built like weapons themselves, all angles and armor plating, bristling with cannons that could crack planets. Dark metal hulls absorbed light, making them appear like holes cut from reality itself. On the opposite side of the system, the Valeth Collective's vessels glowed with an ethereal beauty that made them seem almost alive. Their organic curves and bioluminescent patterns would have been magnificent under any other circumstances. But David knew those graceful ships contained weapons that could unmake matter at the molecular level. Between these two nightmares lay Sanctuary, a blue and green world that had become home to 3 million souls seeking nothing more than safety and peace. Communications, open channels to both fleet commanders, Captain Torres ordered from her position in the center of the bridge. Her voice remained steady despite the impossible odds they faced, the main screen divided to show 2 beings who represented everything wrong with the current galactic order. Commander Thane of the Kroner Empire had replaced most of his original body with cybernetic implants after countless battles. Half his face was metal and circuits, and his remaining eye glowed with artificial light. He looked like war itself given flesh and purpose. Architect Liren of the Valeth Collective appeared to be his complete opposite. Her translucent skin shifted through subtle color patterns that indicated mood and thought. She was beautiful in an alien way, but her beauty carried the cold perfection of a being who saw other species as evolutionary mistakes to be corrected. Humans. Thane's voice came through speakers that distorted his words into mechanical growls. Your ships do not belong in this system. Withdraw immediately, or we will add your wreckage to the debris field we're about to create. Architect Liren spoke with the musical tones of her species, but her words carried equal menace. Captain Torres, your people have shown admirable neutrality during this conflict. Do not throw away that wisdom by interfering in matters that transcend your understanding. David watched his captain rise from her chair with the dignity that had made humans respected throughout the galaxy. She had no cybernetic enhancements, no exotic alien abilities, no weapons that could reshape reality. She was simply a human being who had chosen to do what was right. Commander Thane, Architect Liren, I speak for the Terran Federation and the Galactic Peacekeeping Council, Torres began. The world below us contains 3 million non-combatant refugees under our protection. We will not permit any hostile action against Sanctuary or its inhabitants. Both alien commanders began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a chorus of threats and ultimatums. David caught fragments about human arrogance, interference in galactic affairs, and promises of swift destruction. But Captain Torres simply raised her hand for silence. Let me be absolutely clear, she continued. We are not choosing sides in your war. We are choosing the side of every innocent being on that planet who simply wants to live in peace. If you attack Sanctuary, you attack us. The communication channels went dark, leaving the bridge of the Harmony in tense silence. David checked his instruments and confirmed what everyone already knew. The 3 human ships were outnumbered by more than 30 to 1. Their shields and weapons were no match for the forces arrayed against them. Captain, he reported, both fleets are beginning to move. Estimated time to weapons range is 47 minutes. Torres nodded and activated the ship's internal communications. All hands, this is the captain. In less than an hour, we will engage forces that vastly exceed our capabilities. We cannot win this battle through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. But we can win by refusing to abandon the principles that define us as human beings. David felt the words resonate through his bones. Around the bridge, his fellow crew members straightened at their posts. They were scared, but they were also proud. How many people in galactic history had been given the chance to stand for something that truly mattered? We are not just representing humanity today, Torres continued. We represent the idea that civilization means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We represent the belief that some things are worth fighting for even when victory seems impossible. The ship's tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Kim, looked up from her displays with grim determination. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups from both fleets. They're not just planning to invade Sanctuary. They're preparing to sterilize the entire planet. David felt his heart sink. The refugees below had no idea what was coming. They had trusted humanity to keep them safe, and now 3 million innocent beings were about to die because 2 ancient powers couldn't resolve their differences without genocide. Open a galaxy-wide emergency channel, Torres ordered. All frequencies, maximum broadcast power. Channel open, Captain. David confirmed. Torres took a deep breath and began speaking words that would be heard on hundreds of worlds throughout the galaxy. This is Captain Emma Torres of the Terran Federation vessel Harmony. We are 3 ships about to engage 2 fleets in defense of 3 million refugees. We have no realistic chance of military victory, but victory is not our objective. She paused as the first energy discharges began to light up the space around them. The Kroner ships were testing their weapons, preparing for the slaughter to come. To every species listening, to every world watching this transmission, we want you to understand what we believe in. We believe that strength exists to protect. Weakness, not exploit it. We believe that advanced civilizations have a duty to lift up those who struggle, not crush them. We believe that sometimes you must stand for what is right even when you stand alone. The first shots erupted from the Kroner fleet, massive plasma bolts that turned the void between stars into a light show of destruction. But they weren't aimed at Sanctuary. They were aimed directly at the 3 small human ships that dared to defy them. David watched the tactical display as the weapons fire streaked toward them at the speed of light. In seconds, they would discover whether human courage was enough to stand against the fury of empires. All hands brace for impact. Torres announced calmly. The universe exploded around them. The impact threw Lieutenant David Park against his console with enough force to crack ribs. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge of the UES Harmony in red as sparks erupted from overloaded systems. The ship's shields had absorbed most of the chronoplasma barrage, but the energy feedback was tearing through the vessel's internal systems like wildfire. "Damage report!" Captain Torres shouted over the wailing alarms. "Forward shields down to 60%, Lieutenant Commander Kim called. Out from her damaged tactical station. "We've lost primary sensors and 2 of our main engines are offline." David struggled back to his communications post as another wave of enemy fire lit up the darkness around them. The Valeth Collective had joined the attack, but their weapons were different. Instead of crude plasma bolts, they were using gravitational manipulation devices that pulled at the human ships like invisible hands trying to tear them apart. Through the chaos, David could see the UES Valiant spinning helplessly as Valeth. Gravity weapons twisted its hull into impossible shapes. Metal groaned and buckled under forces that shouldn't exist in normal space. The Meridian was fighting back with every weapon it possessed, but its missiles simply disappeared into the void as chrono defensive systems vaporized them before they could reach their targets. "Captain," David managed to say through gritted teeth, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from both fleets. They're preparing for a coordinated bombardment of Sanctuary." Torres gripped her command chair as another impact nearly threw her to the deck. "Open channels to Captains Williams and Rodriguez." The screen flickered to life, showing the bridges of the other 2 human vessels. Captain Rachel Williams of the Valiant was bleeding from a head wound, but her eyes burned with determination. Captain Alex Rodriguez of the Meridian was coordinating damage control efforts while fires raged behind him. "Status report," Torres requested. "We're holding together," Williams replied as her ship shuddered under another gravitational assault. "Hull integrity is down to 40%, but we're still fighting." Rodriguez wiped smoke from his eyes. "We've lost most of our weapons, but our engines are still functional. We can maintain position between the fleets and Sanctuary." David watched the tactical display with growing horror. The mathematics of their situation were becoming clearer with each passing moment. The 3 human ships were taking damage far faster than they could inflict it. Within hours, they would be reduced to floating debris, but something else was happening that defied all tactical logic. Even as the human vessels were being systematically destroyed, they maintained their position between the alien fleets and Sanctuary. They absorbed punishment that would have shattered most ships, yet they refused to retreat or surrender. "Captain," David called out, "I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy." "Dozens of species are monitoring our situation," Torres nodded grimly. "Patch me through to all frequencies again. Channel open," David confirmed. "This is Captain Torres aboard the Harmony," she began, her voice somehow remaining steady despite the chaos around them. "We have been under attack for 3 hours. Our ships are damaged and our crews are dying, but we will not abandon the 3 million refugees who trust us to protect them." Another barrage of weapons fire illuminated the space around them. The Harmony's shields flickered and nearly collapsed before the generators managed to stabilize them. "To every species listening, we want you to understand something important. We are not heroes. We are simply people who believe that protecting the innocent is more important than preserving our own lives. We believe that civilization means standing together against those who would destroy the weak." David glanced at his sensors and gasped. "Captain, I'm reading new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Multiple ships approaching from all vectors." The tactical display began filling with new symbols as vessels emerged from the void. David recognized some of the configurations immediately. Andorian merchant ships, Deltaran medical frigates, Nexari exploration vessels. But there were others he had never seen before, representing species that had remained hidden throughout. "The war, my God," Lieutenant Commander Kim whispered from her station. "There must be hundreds of them." The first to arrive were 40 cargo haulers from the Rillan trade convoy. They had been converted into makeshift carriers launching swarms of fighter craft that immediately engaged the outer edges of both alien fleets. The pilots were civilians with no military training, but they flew with desperate courage that reminded David of humanity's own determination. Next came the Corvani Republic's home defense fleet, followed by ships from a dozen species that had spent years cowering in fear of the great powers. They were miners, traders, explorers, and doctors who had never expected to fight a war. But they had watched 3 human ships stand alone against impossible odds, and it had awakened something in them that transcended fear. Captain Torres, a new voice came through the communications system. This is Admiral Terran of the Altarian Council. By order of our government, Sanctuary is now under the protection of the Altarian fleet. Captain Torres, another voice followed. Commander Voss of the Nixari Exploration Service, our science vessels are armed and ready to assist. Captain Torres, a third transmission arrived. Elder Kane of the Etherean Collective. We have maintained isolation for 3 centuries, but your courage has convinced us that some causes transcend neutrality. David watched in amazement as the tactical display transformed before his eyes. What had begun as a hopeless battle between 3 human ships and 2 galactic superpowers was becoming something unprecedented. Dozens of species that had never cooperated before were working together to defend a world full of refugees. On the bridge of his dreadnought, Commander Thane stared at his own tactical displays with growing alarm. His 15 ships now faced a coalition fleet that was growing larger every minute. More importantly, his own crews were beginning to question their orders as reports came in about the true nature of Sanctuary's population. Sir, one of his subordinates reported nervously, intelligence confirms that the planet below contains only civilian refugees. No military installations, no weapons caches, no strategic value whatsoever. Thane's cybernetic eye flickered as he processed this information. He had built his career on the certainty that the Kroner Empire's enemies deserved no mercy. But facing a coalition of dozens of species defending helpless refugees was forcing him to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of his cause across the system. Architect Liren was experiencing similar doubts. The perfect unity of Vela thought was fracturing as individual ship commanders began expressing concerns about attacking a humanitarian mission. Several of her vessels had already powered down their weapons and withdrawn to defensive positions. David realized they were witnessing something that historians would debate for centuries. The moral weight of the human sacrifice was changing the fundamental equation of the conflict. Species that had been enemies or strangers were finding common ground in their desire to protect the innocent. Captain, he reported with growing excitement, I count over 200 allied vessels now, with more arriving every few minutes. We're receiving support from 63 different species. Torres smiled through the blood running down her face from a head wound. Open a channel to both fleet commanders. When Thane and Liren appeared on screen again, their expressions had changed. The certainty that had driven them to this system was being replaced by something that looked almost like doubt. Gentlemen, Torres began, you now face a choice that will define your legacy. You can continue this attack and face not just 3 human ships, but representatives from across the galaxy. Or you can recognize that perhaps some things transcend the boundaries of your war. The silence that followed Captain Torres' words stretched across the Kepler system like a held breath. Lieutenant David Park watched his tactical displays as more ships continued to drop out of hyperspace, joining the growing coalition that surrounded Sanctuary. What had begun as a desperate stand by 3 human vessels had transformed into something the galaxy had never witnessed before. Commander Thane of the Kroner Empire stood on his command deck staring at screens that showed a nightmare scenario for any military commander. His 15 dreadnoughts, which had seemed so powerful hours earlier, were now surrounded by over 300 vessels from 67 different species. But the numbers weren't what disturbed him most. It was the realization that his own crews were beginning to question everything they had been taught about the righteousness of their cause. Sir, his tactical officer reported hesitantly, several of our captains are requesting permission to withdraw from combat positions. They're citing concerns about engaging civilian refugee ships. Thane's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this information. For decades, the Kroner military had operated on the principle that their enemies were fundamentally evil and deserved no mercy. But facing a coalition of species willing to die to protect refugees was forcing even hardened warriors to confront uncomfortable truths about their mission on the other side of the system. Architect Lyran was experiencing her own crisis of certainty. The Veloth Collective prided itself on logical decision-making and perfect unity of purpose. But that unity was fracturing as individual ship commanders began to express doubts about attacking what was clearly a humanitarian mission. Architect, one of her subordinates reported through the bioneural link that connected all Veloth minds, 17 of our vessels have independently powered down their weapon systems. Their commanders are requesting clarification of our strategic objectives. Lyran felt the perfect harmony of Veloth thought wavering for the first time in her memory. The collective consciousness that guided their species was struggling to reconcile their military goals with the moral reality of what they were being asked to do aboard the Harmony. David watched Captain Torres grip her command chair as another systems failure sent sparks cascading across the bridge. Their ship was barely holding together, but somehow it continued to maintain position between the alien fleets and Sanctuary. "Captain," he reported, "I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. The Refugee Council wants to thank us for our protection." "Put it through," Torres ordered, her voice hoarse from breathing smoke and giving orders for 6 straight hours. The screen flickered to show a collection of beings from dozens of different species. They stood together in what appeared to be the main assembly hall of Sanctuary's largest refugee camp. An elderly Andorian female stepped forward to speak. "Captain Torres, I am Elder Myra, representing the 3 million refugees under your protection. We want you to know that we are not afraid. We have lived through war, persecution, and the loss of our homes. But today we have seen something beautiful. We have seen beings from across the galaxy risk everything to protect strangers they have never met." David felt tears streaming down his face as he watched beings who had lost everything express gratitude for the sacrifice being made on their behalf. Children from a dozen species waved at the camera, their innocent faces filled with hope despite the battle raging above their heads. "We understand that many of you may die defending us," Elder Myra continued. "We want you to know that your sacrifice will not be forgotten. You have shown us that the galaxy still contains beings who believe in protecting the weak and standing for what is right regardless of the cost." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in emotional silence. David realized that every person in the Coalition fleet had just been reminded of exactly what they were fighting for. Not territory, not resources, not military advantage, but the simple idea that innocent lives had value. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Kim called out from her tactical station, "something's happening with the Kroner fleet. 3 of their ships have broken formation and are moving to neutral positions." David checked his sensors and confirmed the report. The Kroner vessels were powering down their weapons and withdrawing from attack positions. More importantly, they were beginning to transmit on emergency frequencies. "This is Captain Vex of the Kroner vessel Retribution," came a gruff voice over the communications system. "I am formally requesting political asylum from the Coalition fleet. I will not participate in the slaughter of innocent civilians." "This is Commander Horn of the Destroyer Vengeance," another transmission followed. "My crew has voted to defect from the Kroner Empire. We request permission to join the defense of Sanctuary." David watched in amazement as the tactical display showed more Kroner ships breaking away from their formation. These were military vessels that had spent years following orders without question, but the moral weight of the situation was proving stronger than military discipline. The same phenomenon was occurring within the Veloth fleet, individual ship. Commanders were exercising personal judgment for the first time in their species' collective memory. The perfect unity that had defined Veloth civilization for millennia was cracking under the pressure of an impossible moral choice. Architect Liren, came a transmission from one of the Valeth vessels. This is Subcommander Nix of the science ship Illumination. I'm experiencing cognitive dissonance regarding our current mission parameters. Illogical analysis of available data suggests that our target has no military value and contains only non-combatant refugees. I concur with Subcommander Nix, another Valeth officer transmitted. The destruction of Sanctuary would serve no strategic purpose and would result in significant damage to our species' reputation throughout the galaxy. David realized they were witnessing the collapse of military discipline on both sides of the conflict. The simple act of 3 human ships refusing to abandon their principles was causing a cascade effect that was tearing apart the command structure of 2 galactic superpowers. "Captain," he reported to Torres, "I count 43 Kroner vessels and 28 Valeth ships that have withdrawn from attack positions. Several are requesting permission to join our defensive formation." Torres smiled through the exhaustion and pain of 6 hours of continuous battle. "Grant their requests. Anyone willing to defend those refugees is welcome in our fleet." The tactical display continued to evolve as former enemies found themselves fighting side by side to protect a world full of strangers. Kroner dreadnoughts took position alongside Valeth science vessels. Human peacekeepers coordinated with alien merchants and explorers. Species that had been at war for generations were learning to work together in defense of a common cause. On his command deck, Commander Thane realized that his military mission had become impossible. More than half of his fleet had defected or withdrawn from combat. His remaining vessels were outnumbered by more than 10 to 1. But more importantly, he was beginning to understand that continuing the attack would make him a monster in the eyes of the galaxy. "Sir," his remaining tactical officer reported, "Admiral Hayes of the Kroner High Command is demanding an immediate status report. He wants to know why we haven't commenced the bombardment of Sanctuary." Thane stared at his displays for a long moment, watching former enemies work together with a harmony that his own military had never achieved. Then he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. "Send a message to Admiral Hayes," he ordered. "Tell him that the situation has become too complex for military solutions. Tell him that sometimes even warriors must acknowledge when they have chosen the wrong side." 6 months after the Battle of Sanctuary, Admiral Emma Torres stood in the observation lounge of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching construction crews from 47 different species work together to complete the galaxy's first truly integrated spaceport. The massive structure orbited Sanctuary like a protective ring, serving as both a symbol of cooperation and a practical hub for the humanitarian operations that had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The transformation had begun the moment Commander Thane and Architect Liren simultaneously announced a ceasefire in the Kepler system. Neither leader had formally surrendered, but both had recognized that continuing the attack would destroy whatever remained of their legitimacy. Instead, they had withdrawn their fleets to reassess what they called strategic priorities, giving the galaxy time to process what had just occurred. The coalition that had formed to protect Sanctuary didn't dissolve after the immediate threat ended. Instead, it grew stronger and more organized with each passing day. Species that had spent decades in isolation began opening diplomatic channels with each other. Trade agreements were signed between former enemies. Scientific research projects brought together minds that had previously been separated by fear and mistrust. Torres turned from the viewport as her aide, Commander Lisa Park, approached with the daily reports. The stack of datapads seemed to grow larger every day as more worlds requested membership in what had become known as the Sanctuary Alliance. "The latest statistics, Admiral," Lisa reported with barely contained excitement. "We now have formal treaties with 83 species, with 17 more applications pending approval. The refugee resettlement program has found permanent homes for over 2 million beings. The medical exchange program has shared life-saving treatments across 46 different worlds." Torres accepted the reports with a mixture of pride and amazement. What had begun as a desperate military action had evolved into the largest humanitarian organization in galactic history. The Alliance operated 12 refugee worlds, maintained 37 medical stations, and provided disaster relief to any planet that requested assistance, regardless of political affiliation. What about the military situation? Torres asked. Though she already suspected the answer would be encouraging, both the Kroner Empire and Valeth Collective have formally requested alliance mediation for their border disputes, Lisa replied. Neither side wants to risk another public relations disaster like Sanctuary. They've discovered that the galaxy no longer tolerates senseless violence against civilian populations. Torres nodded with satisfaction. The Great War between the ancient powers continued in some regions, but it no longer consumed everything in its path. The Alliance had created islands of peace throughout the galaxy, and their example was inspiring others to seek diplomatic solutions rather than military ones. Admiral, Lisa continued, we've also received some interesting requests for asylum. Over 3,000 Kroner officers have defected from their military, and nearly 2,000 Valeth commanders have chosen individual consciousness over collective unity. They all want to join Alliance peacekeeping forces. Torres smiled at. This news, former enemies working together, had become the Alliance's greatest strength. Kroner warriors brought military expertise to protection missions, while Valeth scientists contributed advanced medical and technological knowledge to humanitarian projects. Humans provided something equally valuable but harder to quantify: the stubborn insistence that doing the right thing was more important than following orders. The door to the observation lounge opened and 3 familiar figures entered. Captain Rachel Williams of the Valiant, Captain Alex Rodriguez of the Meridian, and Captain David Park of the newly commissioned Harmony II had all received promotions and new commands, but they still met regularly with Torres to coordinate Alliance operations. Admiral, Captain Williams reported, the peace talks between the Altarian Council and the Nixari Republic concluded successfully. They've agreed to joint colonization of the Vega system, with Alliance observers ensuring fair treatment of all settlers. The medical mission to the Centauri outbreak has been completed, Captain Rodriguez added. We saved over 400,000 lives using combined human, Valeth, and Deltaran techniques. The planetary government has formally requested Alliance protection status. Captain Park, who had been promoted after his exceptional performance during the Battle of Sanctuary, delivered the most significant news. Admiral, I just received word from Earth. The Terran Federation Council has voted unanimously to make the Sanctuary Alliance humanity's primary galactic policy. We're officially committing our entire diplomatic and military resources to the expansion of peacekeeping operations. Torres felt a surge of pride in her species. Humanity had always been known for stubborn idealism, but committing their entire civilization to protecting others was unprecedented in galactic history. It was also exactly what she had hoped would happen. There's more, Park continued. Intelligence reports suggest that the Kroner Empire is experiencing widespread internal dissent. Over 40% of their military commanders have requested reassignment to non-combat roles. Their recruitment numbers are at historic lows because young Kroners are joining Alliance humanitarian missions instead of Imperial military service. The Valeth Collective is facing similar challenges, Williams added. Their perfect unity of thought is breaking down as more individuals choose personal conscience over collective directives. Some xenobiologists believe we're witnessing the evolution of their entire species toward individual consciousness. Torres turned back to the viewport where the construction crews continued their work. She could see beings from dozens of species laboring together on projects that would benefit everyone. Former soldiers have become engineers and doctors. Ancient enemies shared meals and exchanged cultural traditions. Children from different worlds played games together in the station's recreational areas. You know what amazes me most about all this? Torres mused. We never actually defeated either fleet that day at Sanctuary. We just showed them that there was another choice available. The observation lounge fell silent as they contemplated the truth of those words. The Battle of Sanctuary hadn't been won through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. It had been won by the simple act of refusing to abandon their principles when abandonment would have been safer and easier. "Admiral," Lisa Park interrupted their thoughts, "we have a situation developing in the Rigel system. A plague outbreak has overwhelmed local medical facilities, and both the Kroner Empire and Valeth Collective have populations on nearby worlds. They're both requesting Alliance assistance." Torres straightened her uniform and headed toward the door. "Assemble a joint medical fleet. I want Terran doctors, Valeth biotechnology specialists, and chronologistics coordinators working together. Show them how much more they can accomplish through cooperation than through conflict." As the team dispersed to coordinate the relief mission, Torres remained in the observation lounge for a few more minutes. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the surface of Sanctuary below, still glowing with the lights of refugee settlements that had become permanent communities. 3 million beings who had once been homeless were now building new lives together, creating a society that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Torres activated the holographic display and found herself face to face with a being she had never expected to see again. Commander Thane of the Kroner Empire appeared on screen, but he looked different. The harsh cybernetic implants had been removed, replaced with more subtle medical devices that restored his natural appearance. "Admiral Torres," Thane began, his voice no longer distorted by mechanical processors. "I am transmitting from the Kroner border world of Nexus Prime. I wanted to inform you that the planetary government has voted to withdraw from the Empire and request Alliance protection status." Torres felt her eyebrows rise in surprise. Nexus Prime was one of the Kroner Empire's most important military bases, home to over 50 million citizens and massive shipyards that produced their most advanced vessels. "Commander, that's an incredibly significant development," Torres replied carefully. "What prompted this decision?" Thane's expression showed something she had never seen from a Kroner officer before genuine wars. "Admiral, 6 months ago I was prepared to commit genocide against innocent refugees because my superiors told me it was necessary for victory. Your people showed me that following orders is not the same as doing what is right. The citizens of Nexus Prime have reached the same conclusion about our empire." The implications of this news were staggering. If major Kroner worlds were defecting to the Alliance, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. More importantly, it would demonstrate that the principles the Alliance represented were attractive to people living under authoritarian rule. "There's more," Thane continued. "Architect Lirin has contacted me through diplomatic channels. Several Valeth worlds are also considering independence from the Collective. We're discussing the possibility of joint applications for Alliance membership." Torres realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Former enemies were not just making peace. They were actively choosing to abandon their old governments in favor of a new system based on cooperation and mutual aid. "Commander, the Alliance will welcome any world that commits to our principles of protecting the innocent and resolving conflicts through peaceful means," Torres assured him. "But I want you to understand what you're asking for. Membership requires abandoning military conquest as a tool of policy. It means committing resources to helping others rather than expanding your own power." Thane nodded firmly. "Admiral, I have spent my entire adult life serving a system that measured success by how much destruction we could inflict on our enemies. I watched your people risk everything to protect strangers they had never met, and I realized that true strength comes from what you're willing to sacrifice for others, not what you're willing to take from them." The transmission ended, leaving Torres alone with thoughts that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The galaxy's two greatest military powers were crumbling from within as their own people chose compassion over conquest. The Alliance hadn't defeated them through force of arms, it defeated them by offering a better way to live. A new communication alert drew her attention to another incoming message. This time the screen showed Elder Myra, the Andorian refugee leader. who had spoken for Sanctuary's population during the battle. "Admiral Torres?" Elder Myra began with obvious excitement. "I wanted to inform you of a remarkable development. The first class of the Sanctuary Diplomatic Academy graduated yesterday. We now have trained negotiators from 37 different species ready to help resolve conflicts throughout the galaxy." Torres smiled at this news. The Academy had been established to train refugees in diplomatic skills, giving them the tools to help prevent future conflicts. It was one of dozens of educational programs that had grown out of the Alliance's humanitarian mission. Even more significant, Elder Myra continued, is that half of our graduates are former military officers from the Kroner Empire and Valeth Collective. They're choosing to dedicate their lives to preventing the kind of wars they once fought. Torres felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she considered the transformation that had occurred. Warriors had become peacemakers. Refugees had become diplomats. Ancient enemies had become allies. The change hadn't happened through conquest or coercion, but through the simple demonstration that cooperation produced better results than conflict. As she prepared to leave the observation lounge, Torres took one last look at the bustling activity outside. Ships from dozens of species moved through Unity Station's docking bays, carrying supplies for relief missions, medical equipment for disaster zones, and diplomats heading to peace negotiations. The station had become a symbol of what the galaxy could accomplish when its people chose to work together instead of tear each other apart. Her communication device chimed with a personal message from Admiral Hayes back on Earth. "Emma, the Federation Council wanted me to pass along their congratulations on the success of the Alliance. They also wanted me to tell you that your name is being considered for the new position of Galactic Humanitarian Coordinator. It would mean overseeing all Alliance operations and representing our values to the entire galaxy." Torres smiled as she considered the offer. 6 months ago, she had been the captain of a single ship facing impossible odds. Now she was being asked to lead an organization that was reshaping galactic civilization. The irony was not lost on her. Sometimes the greatest victories came from simply refusing to give up on your principles, even when everyone else thought you were crazy. She activated her communication device to respond to Admiral Hayes. "Tell the Council I'm honored by their consideration, but remind them that this isn't about any one person or species. This is about proving that the galaxy still has room for heroes, and that anyone can become a hero by choosing to protect those who cannot protect themselves." As Torres walked through the corridors of Unity Station, she passed beings from across the galaxy working together on projects that would have been unimaginable before the Battle of Sanctuary. The Alliance had accomplished something that military force alone could never achieve. It had changed the way entire civilizations thought about their place in the universe. The galaxy was still far from perfect. Wars continued in some regions. Injustices flourished on many worlds, and countless beings still suffered from poverty, disease, and oppression. But for the first time in galactic history, there was a growing movement of species committed to helping each other rather than exploiting each other. Admiral Emma Torres had learned something important during those desperate hours above Sanctuary. Courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about doing what was right even when you were terrified. And sometimes, just sometimes, that courage was contagious enough to change the universe.